This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. We're fortunate tonight to have as our guest Stephen Reed, the Democratic nominee for probate judge in Montgomery County. A lot of our viewers are in Montgomery County, so we thought you would enjoy seeing the candidate for probate judge on the Democratic side of the ticket. Stephen, good to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, sir. Stephen Reed was born and raised here in Montgomery, wasn't you, Stephen?
Yes, sir.
So you're a native son running for your probate judge.
Absolutely.
This is your first public race, isn't it?
Yes.
For public office?
Yes, it is.
Now, you're not a stranger to politics because of your daddy, though.
That's correct. I've been around politics all my life, voluntarily and involuntarily.
Dr. Joe Reed is Stephen's father, and Dr. Reed has been an institution in Alabama politics for close to 4 or 5 decades now.
Yep.
Your daddy was born down in Conecuh County.
That's right, down in Evergreen, Alabama.
Mm-hmm. And he earned his doctorate, and he and Dr. Hubbard merged two organizations, and they headed the AEA for how many years?
Well over 40 years. He was with the Alabama State Teachers Association for a few years prior to merging with the AEA, and they were around for a long time.
Now, did Dr. Reed, did he retire with Dr. Hubbard?
They did.
The same
did,
time?
Yes.
They said they retired the same year.
Yes.
Same
they came
time.
in together and decided they were going to go out together.
Yeah.
So
they were a powerful duo.
yes, they were. They made a lot of good things happen, I think, for this state, and certainly left their mark.
Now, so I guess Dr. Reed's all retired now, isn't he?
He's all retired and enjoying retirement and staying busy with some of his hobbies and the grandkids and all that stuff. But he finds something to do every day. He's one of those busybodies.
You know, Stephen, everybody said that about retirement. People, I say, what are you doing with your retirement? And they say, well, I'm busier than I ever thought I'd be.
That's right.
You've got 3 of his grandchildren.
I do.
Now, do you have an older or a younger brother?
I have an older brother.
Just 2 of y'all?
It's 3. I have an older brother and an older sister.
Okay, and you're the baby?
I am.
Okay, but you're 38 years old.
Yes, 38 and
about 28, but you're 38
well,
years
thank
old.
you. I'm trying to stay 38, so trying to eat right and live well and take care of myself.
You know, George Wallace ran for governor one time, and first or second time, he was in his 30s when he ran, and he was ashamed to tell people he was in his 30s, so
really?
He would fudge on his age by 1 year. You know, and when he ran for governor, he thought everybody vote for somebody in their 30s for governor.
That's interesting. You know, you have a lot of people, especially in politics, who run at a very young age. Where you're talking about, I think, current Vice President Joseph Biden, I think, became senator at 28, 29 years old, and has been there for a long time, and now obviously is a Democratic nominee for Vice President again. But you have a lot of people who start off very young. We have a lot of young legislators and a lot of young city councilmen around this state as well.
Speaking of that, Stephen, you know, I had Roger Bedford on the show last week before you were on here, and Roger and I have been friends a long time. We both went to the legislature the same year.
Did you?
In 1982. I was 30, but Roger was just 24 years old.
Wow.
When he was elected. Our primary was in September, and I had just turned 31. I was 31 in 1982, but Roger was 24 when he qualified. You have to be 25 to be a state senator. So he had just turned 25 when he was elected. So talking about being there a long time.
Absolutely.
At a young age. But Wallace was a legislator when he was 27.
I didn't know that.
And from Barber County. And a lot of young legislators get there at an early age. And Albert Brewer had did the same thing.
That's right.
But so you've got, but now Joe is retired, and
my mother's retired as well, so she kind of keeps them busy as well. Molly Reed, she worked over at Alabama State for
I remember that. Now, Stephen, how old are your children?
My children are 13, 5, and 2.
13, 5, and 2. Now, did you marry a girl from Montgomery? Did y'all?
No. My wife is originally from New Orleans, Louisiana, so I get a lot of good Creole cooking at home.
Did y'all meet at Morehouse or?
No. Well, we met in Atlanta. We were both working there and living there, and met there and dated for a few years, and then came on back here.
But you went to undergraduate school at Morehouse.
I did.
And got an MBA at Vanderbilt.
Yes, sir.
You know, a lot of folks don't realize this. The job you're running for, probate judge, in Alabama does not require a law degree, obviously,
That's
because
right.
the incumbent who you run against is not, as a non-lawyer.
That's correct.
And you have a master's, but now there's one or two counties that require it. I know Jefferson does.
Yes.
But there may be one or two others, but I'd say 64 out of the 67 counties
I think that's about the number.
do not require him, and I would say probably the majority of probate judges are not lawyers.
That's correct. And Montgomery County has never, the probate judge has never been a lawyer.
Walker Hobby wasn't a lawyer.
That's correct.
He was there a long time.
He sure was. He was an institution.
About 24 years, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was a good legislator for that.
Really?
He was a very powerful legislator.
Well, he has a great reputation, and he was someone that did a lot of things on a lot of different levels here, both locally as well as statewide. And, you know, even where the incumbent is concerned, he's been involved in politics for 30 plus years. He was former right-hand man for Mayor Emory Farmer before he was probate judge, and he's been probate judge for a few years now as well. So he's kind of been around the block a few times as well, and that's what makes this race so challenging. But it also makes it a lot more fun because it's certainly a contrast of ideas, and it's a contrast of different perspectives on what should happen in the probate office and how to make this community better and how to move this county forward for the next few years.
Now, how did you decide that this would be your first race and you run for probate judge? How did you pick this particular position?
That's a great question. I looked at really the job requirements and responsibilities of what the probate judge did, and I liked the political aspect of it in the sense of being chief election officer, so to speak, and being over the voter registration and things of that nature, but I also like the administrative part of it. The probate judge's office is the office that people deal with the most in this county. There are over 400,000 transactions. There are 70 plus employees, and so whether you're coming down for a driver's license or a marriage license, or you're dealing with something with a will or an estate, or you have to deal with a conservatorship or guardianship, all of that falls underneath the probate office. And one of the things that I always said was, well, besides saying I would never run for public office, was that if I did decide to run for something, I wanted to run for something where I can make a big impact. And I thought the probate judge's office fit my skill set and fit my background, both business-wise, academically, as well as politically. And so that's how I decided to run for this office. And I had seen some things that had happened in the probate judge's office that I really disagreed with, and I thought that we needed to go in a different direction. And I just felt that my opponent was living in politics of the past and not politics of the future. And I thought that he was more aligned with where the county was 20, 25 years ago versus where I think we need to take the county for the next 20, 25 years.
What would be some of the things that you would be different than the incumbent on, since you're challenging an incumbent in the office of probate judge? What would be some of the things specifically that you would do differently in the probate office in Montgomery County that you think could be done differently or better?
There are quite a few things. The first thing is I won't use the office for personal gain. I won't use that office to deal in transactions that I don't think would pass today's ethics laws. And so if that's buying land that you know a deal is going to come, be it for the Hyundai motor plant, and then suing the Alabama Industrial Board, suing people like Commissioner Bill Joseph, suing people like Ruth Foster and those other folks who are on that board, those are things I don't think the probate judge should be involved in. I also don't think the probate judge should be standing by while the legislature passes laws that are going to impact the people of Montgomery County. So if there's an immigration law that's going to impact people's wait times and the amount of documents that people have to bring down to the probate judge's office, I would expect the probate judge to be very active. I would be proactive in terms of keeping my finger on the pulse of what's going on in the legislature, because even though that's a different branch of government, if it impacts the probate office, I want to be sure that they hear from me in the committee before they pass the bill. I want to be sure that they understand all the impacts, because some of the times the legislators don't know what the impact is going to be because they're working at a different level than maybe you're a local official. So they have to kind of be informed. And so I think being more proactive is something I would certainly do different, and I would certainly be opposed to any voter ID laws. The Alabama legislature passed that a few years ago. My opponent did not do anything about that. He sat by and let that happen and let that take place without speaking up against it. I'm ardently against any voter ID laws because I think they are not equally implemented across the board, and I think that they can be in some ways punitive toward people who may not have a photo ID. And the last thing I think that I certainly would do different is I would work with the county commission. I would improve the communication, improve the dialogue with the county commission so that we don't have a situation that we have now, where right now our East Side probate office, we're paying 2 rents, or we will be in about a month or so, because there's been an overlap of lease agreements. And so the county commission had an understanding that to renovate a particular office, it was going to cost $100,000. And unfortunately, when the probate office came back with the actual estimates, it was well over $500,000. So you're talking about a big gap there and a big misunderstanding in terms of appropriation of funds. And I think they're working to try to straighten that out. But there was a big communications gap. And so now we're renting 2 probate offices at once because we haven't really finished one lease before moving into.
Where are the satellite offices in Montgomery? I didn't know there's a satellite office of probate judges.
Yes, you have one on Woodley Road, you have one over on Mobile Highway, you also have the downtown location, and you have one on the Atlanta Highway.
Did not know that. You got 4 locations for the probate judge office in Montgomery County.
That's correct.
Well, that's a good service to people, really, to have them out where they can get to them easily, you know?
It surely is. And the thing is, if you're going to upgrade one, you probably need to look at all the facilities, and you need to be sure that all of them are upgraded, so that whether or not you're at the one on Woodley Road or you're at the one on Atlanta Highway, you're going to be coming into a modern and comfortable space where you can do whatever transaction you have and get in and get out with great customer service, with updated technology. And those are things that I think we have to try to look at to improve in the Montgomery County Probate
Do they rent
office.
those buildings or they own them?
They rent them.
All of them rented except for the downtown?
I'm not sure if all of them are rented, but I know this one on the east side of Montgomery is.
Mm-hmm. Well, Stephen, going back to the to running for this office, so you saw this one. You've been running for about 2 years, hadn't you? You started running?
Well, not quite. I started running last year, 2011, and it was something that I wanted to be sure, as a first-time candidate going against a long-term incumbent and an political institution here, I knew it would be a lot of hard work, and I knew I'd have to knock on a lot of doors and talk to a lot of people. And that's what we've been doing since October of last year, in terms of trying to talk to people, whether it be at their homes or at their churches and neighborhood groups, things of that nature. All of those ways we try to communicate what we want to do different. And really it's about moving Montgomery County forward. And it's about new leadership and new ideas, utilizing technology, and bringing a probate judge that reflects where Montgomery County is today. Montgomery County is a Democratic county. It's one of the few blue counties in the state, but it is a Democratic county.
Or Montgomery County.
He sure did. He sure did. And I think he'll carry it again this year as well. We feel very good about that. And so I think it's time that we have a Democratic probate judge that reflects where the county is right now, not where the county was back in the 1980s.
Stephen, you mentioned a while ago, and I didn't know about those satellite offices, but also you mentioned an issue that kind of has gotten my attention. I've thought about, it's a statewide issue, the voter ID thing. My question to you is, here we sit in the latter part of 2012, has that been approved by Justice, that bill that passed last year? I kind of think Justice may not approve that thing.
Well, we're hoping not, because South Carolina and Texas right now also have that bill that Justice has to approve, and so not yet. But I think from a probate judge's perspective, you're going to be in a leadership position. It's very important that I think you not just manage, but that you lead, and you lead from the front. You don't lead from the back. And so by doing so, you have to be sure the legislators understand that they're passing a law, what that law is going to mean for all of the citizens, not just one particular group. And I think sometimes what happens is we take a few instances and we punish the whole group because of one or two isolated incidents that may happen regarding voter registration and things along that nature. Anyone who's doing something illegal certainly should be prosecuted, but I don't think that a 90-year-old woman who may not have been born at a hospital, who may have been born to a midwife and may never have had a photo ID, and believe it, there are a lot of people out there that do not, should then be told that now all of a sudden she can't vote because she doesn't have a photo ID. She doesn't have a driver's license. Well, that happened in Tennessee, and that can very well happen here. And so I think we have to be out front and we have to be proactive about that, because the other thing is, in Alabama, we have a higher bar, unfortunately, that we have to surpass when it comes to laws that are passed because of the history here. And so we want to be sure that we don't send business and we don't send potential people who may move here, want to relocate here, that Alabama is inhospitable to them. We want to let them know that Alabama is open to anybody and everybody who wants to abide by the law. And so I think that the probate judge could have been more active, and the probate judge should have been more informed about how this was going to impact the people of Montgomery County that elected him 6 years ago.
Stephen, you know, Tom, back to that voter ID bill, and our viewers may not be aware of the law. The 65 Voting Rights Act requires the 5 Deep South states that had a more of a pronounced history of segregation and discrimination. Under the Voting Rights Act, we have to be approved by justice for anything we do. That includes Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi. I know those 4 states.
That's right.
And
South Carolina is one of those.
Okay, so 5 states: South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi in total, and then some other segments of some other states, I think, maybe.
That's correct.
So we have to be scrutinized. We change anything to do with voting.
Yes.
Has to go before justice. And this has not been approved by justice yet.
That's correct.
Because I think it does curtail voting. It would affect the voting rights issue. That's why I think this one may be one that may not fly. And I give you an example, not just the one you're talking about in Tennessee. In this morning's paper, there was an article about a Kentucky 90-year-old couple, a white couple in Kentucky, that had to vote a challenge ballot because they had no form of voter identification. And and secondly, in Kentucky, which is not under the Voting Rights Act, you had a World War II veteran who had no voter ID, and he was turned away because, like you said, somebody that age may not have been born in a hospital.
That's right.
They may not have had, they may not know how to find whether they can't drive anymore. They ain't got a driver's license sometimes.
Right.
I mean, so you really are discriminating against older people that way.
Absolutely.
I don't have some kind of identification sometimes all the time. I mean, I've got a driver's license. I guess I'm okay, but and forcing the folks in Pike County where I vote know me, and so I can show my thing. But that's it can be a problem for somebody older.
Absolutely, and I think certainly as you look at
everybody don't have a driver's license.
Not at all. There are a lot of people that don't for a lot of different reasons, be it economic or be it other reasons as well. And so you want. I guess my thing is I want to be sure that voting is open to as many people who want to vote as possible, as long as they do it legally. And I think that's most people. And I don't want to look at restricting ways to limit that, because I think when you get into that, you start looking at suppressing votes. And I don't want that. I want our democracy to be one that's open and participatory by anyone who wants to be a part of it. I think it's something that makes this country great, and I think it's something that we really need to look at. And with the chief election officer and the elections coming underneath the probate judge's office, that's something that I think should have been dealt with a lot more aggressively, a lot more proactively by the incumbent. And so I guess when you go back to that question you asked me initially, why did I choose this office? It was because I thought I could do a better job than the current probate judge. It was because I thought that I reflected the views and the positions of where this county stands in 2012 going forward versus, again, where it stood maybe some 25 to 30 years ago.
Stephen, talking about 25 or 30 years ago, you know how powerful the probate judges were that long ago in Alabama, don't you?
Well, I've heard a lot of stories since I decided to run for this office.
Let me tell you something. When I was growing up, the probate judge was the king of every county in Alabama politically. Matter of fact, if you study Southern political history, the premier political scientist is a guy named Dr. V.O. Key. Okay. I teach Southern politics at Troy University, and once a year, and I have political science majors. And I use that textbook, which is still used as a primary textbook. I use it at Troy, the University of Alabama uses it, the University of Georgia uses it, Auburn uses it, Vanderbilt uses it.
Okay.
Emory uses it. It's this Dr. V.O. Key. He's been dead 50 years. But he wrote about Alabama politics, and he says there's 2 things that Alabama is unique in. Obviously, we've had a horrific racial past in that era. But further than that, Alabama has the most pronounced friends and neighbors politics, and also every southern state had a kingmaker. In South Carolina, it was a state senator. Each county has a state senate district. In Georgia, it was a courthouse gang. In Mississippi, it was a sheriff. In Louisiana, it was a sheriff. But in Alabama, it was the probate judge. The probate judge is elected to a 6-year term. He also was chairman of the county commission, which gave him complete control over the county treasury, who was hired. There was no merit system back then. Who was hired on the county road crews, the entire money. But here's a caveat. The probate judge in every county was on the fee system. That means he got a cut. He owned that office. He got a cut off every car tag, every boat license, every marriage license, anything sold in the courthouse, he got a cut off of it. And probate judges in counties around 30,000 population in the 1960s was making over $100,000 a year, and that'd be equivalent to $300,000 or $400,000 today.
Wow.
So you had a 6-year term, you're making $300,000 or $400,000 a year in today's dollars.
Sure.
They were making, and when people ran for governor, they came to see the probate judge. He knew where everybody voted, how they voted. He allowed to pay somebody's poll tax. They were behind the poll tax, so they vote for him.
That's interesting.
But the probate judge was the most powerful position, and now it's not as powerful as it is. It's more of an administrative. But you also, Stephen, have a lot of judicial decisions to make. I've talked to a lot of my friends who are my age who are probate judges around the state. Bobby Junkins in Etowah, and Jim Perdue in Crenshaw, and a lot of them around the state who are my old friends politically. Some of them I served in the legislature with, moved on to pre-probate judge. And they say in the last 10 or 15 years, the two things that's made that job the hardest is the tag thing. If you've got the tags in your office, that's a big business to do the tag. The other thing is the commitment hearings, that you've got all the commitment hearings, and you also decide some pretty big estate cases.
That's correct.
You've got some pretty big estate cases you've got to decide, but the advent of drugs, the more use of drugs has made people have more of a mental health problem. So you've got to decide, and I just told them, I guess what you do is you have to bring in mental health experts to help you decide whether this person needs to be committed or not. The commitment hearings take a lot of time.
Absolutely.
Are you aware of that?
I am, and that's something that I've been researching in terms of talking to some current probate judges here in Alabama, and many of them have told me that that's one of the toughest things that you have to do when you're dealing with family members and you're dealing with, in some cases, people that you know. Or maybe that your family knows in terms of whether or not they should be committed to a mental hospital and what's their mental capacity. And they've talked to me about really digging into that if I'm able to become probate judge. And that's something that, again, I take very seriously, and I think it's something that's a responsibility that I feel I can do very well. And it's something that I think really you have to look into and feel very comfortable about what the decision you may be based on the facts and not necessarily based on the emotion of it. But you really just have to look at the facts, and anytime you're dealing with a loved one and things of that nature, it's going to be a very tough decision. You know,
Montgomery has always been a center for other counties around here medically wise. Because they might have the medical facilities in counties like Lowndes or Bullock or Macon or Pike or Butler or Crenshaw or maybe even Autauga and Elmore. Those counties have always come to Montgomery to the hospital sometimes, have been brought there because of emergencies. So you're going to have the overflow of those commitment hearings from some of those counties. If some guy from Bullock or Lowndes County winds up in the hospital in the mental health facility here in Montgomery and they bring him to you, you've got to decide whether they don't send him back to Pike or they don't send him back to Lowndes and Bullock.
Right.
He's here.
Yes. So
they don't send him back to the probate judge there. He's acting crazy here. He's climbing the walls here, throwing things, and and you got to decide, about that guy. So you got to overflow. Yes. You may be in court all the time. Are you aware of that?
I am, and again, that's something that I feel that through the training that some of the probate judges that you must do once you're elected, as well as just my own, I guess, thirst for knowledge. I'm a fast learner, whether it's when I was working for Governor Folsom as senior aide, or whether or not it's something when I was working in small business. I've always been one who really just threw myself into whatever it is that I was doing to be sure that I dotted all my I's and crossed all my T's, to be sure that I knew as much about it as anyone, and that's a challenge that I'm looking forward to. And if that's where the job responsibility, the job duties take me, then I'm fine with that.
I'd forgotten you worked for Jim Jr. Jim Jr. and our old friend. He was been on the show several times.
Yes,
when
absolutely.
He was lieutenant governor, and he and I go way back. And I've got a book coming out you'll enjoy called Alabama Political Stories.
Boy, that sounds pretty interesting.
It's going to have stories about his daddy,
okay,
Big Jim Folsom, and I got stories about Wallace and Howell Heflin and Little Jim, and stories that those of us who've been around politics for a long time, like your daddy, have heard these stories repeated over coffee and visit with each other. But some of the things Big Jim did were so funny and colorful. And also I'm going to go into the power of the probate judges in this book. But it's going to come out next February, published by New South Books here in Montgomery, called Alabama Political Stories. So I'll get you a copy of it.
Will you sign it for me?
Oh, yeah, and I'll get your daddy one, too, because he'll enjoy hearing those stories. I wanted those stories told before we all died.
Yes.
You know, because people in your generation won't believe some of the things that Big Jim did. Has Little Jim tell you some of the stories?
We've heard a couple of those. Probably not as many of the colorful ones as you know.
He was the most colorful, gregarious guy that ever lived. He was about 6'9". For that generation, that was pretty big, you know.
Yes.
And he was the most gregarious, fun-loving guy that ever lived. You ever want to see. But anyway, We'll be following your race real closely. I'm the analyst on CBS 8. We'll be watching that night. This will be one of the races we're going to watch closely on election night. It's a pivotal race, important race. I think it'll be one of the closest races that we're watching in this area.
I think so. It's going to be one of those races that again, we're not taking anything for granted. We know that we're going against an entrenched incumbent, one who's, again, been a part of this political scene for 30 plus years now. And so he has a lot of friends and a lot of connections. He's also got a lot of campaign money. But that comes when you're well liked and you're have a good base, and so we know it's going to be a good challenge, but we feel very good about ourselves. Again, where this county is, being a blue county, a Democratic county, I feel as a Democratic nominee that I stand a strong chance of winning this election. I'm looking forward to meeting the people over these next few weeks and months.
We'll be watching it real closely on election night, and we appreciate you taking time to be with us on this show, Alabama Politics. And we thank you, viewers, for watching tonight. Our guest has been Stephen Reed, Democratic nominee for probate judge in Montgomery County. We look for that election to be closest this fall, and we thank you, viewers, for watching. And we hope you'll tune in again next week for Alabama Politics. Thank you very much. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
It goes by quick, doesn't it?
This has been Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, a production of Troy University Television. Opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Troy University, its administration, faculty, staff, or students.